My son thinks I'm a confused old woman. Brian just showed me security footage of myself clutching a chef's knife in the garden at 3 a.m. It's a lie, a staged performance to prove I'm senile, but the court won't know that when they see my $4.5 million accounts are frozen. He's brought a stranger into my home to watch me, and she's already taken my phone. He thinks he's trapped me in this ancestral estate, but he doesn't realize he's just walked into the office of a woman who knows exactly how to file for a death by 1,000 cuts. Listen to the end to hear how I handled it, and subscribe to hear more of my journey. The blade catches the light like a white tooth in a wolf's mouth. I lean forward, my reading glasses perched on the bridge of my nose, and study the tablet Brian has thrust into my hands. The security footage is grainy, black and white, the timestamp glowing in the corner, 3:07 a.m. The rose garden. My rose garden, the one Marcus and I planted the summer after the Vanderbilt case, back when I still believed my son might grow a spine. The figure on the screen wears my emerald silk robe. She has my silver bob, my height, my deliberate gait. She's holding my global forged chef's knife, the one I used to carve prime rib on Christmas, and she's moving through the thorns like a ghost who's forgotten how to haunt properly. I wasn't in the garden last night. I was asleep in my bed, the high-thread count Egyptian cotton sheets pulled up to my chin, the sound of the Atlantic a low, indifferent hum through the double-paned windows. I look up at my son. "You could have hurt yourself, Mother," Brian says. His voice is all wrong. It's too smooth, too rehearsed, like he's been practicing the line in front of a mirror. There's a bead of sweat tracing the line of his receding hairline, despite the fact that the study is kept at a precise 68 degrees. He smells like expensive gin and desperation, a combination I've learned to associate with men who are about to lose everything. I don't flinch. I hand the tablet back to him, my fingers steady, and meet his eyes. They're brown, like his father's, but they lack the warmth. They're the eyes of a man who's already spent money he doesn't own. "I don't remember this," I say calmly. The lie sits on my tongue like a communion wafer. I let it dissolve there, unremarkable and bland. Brian exhales, a small, relieved sound. He thinks I'm confused. He thinks the trap is closing. I feel the first cold thrill of a hunt. Brian is pacing now, his Italian loafers clicking against the Persian rug in a rhythm that betrays his nerves. He's always been a pacer. Even as a boy, when he lost at chess, he'd circle the board like a caged animal, trying to find the move that would let him escape checkmate. There's a woman standing beside him. She's new. I've never seen her before, but I know exactly what she is. "This is Laura," Brian says, gesturing to her with the false casualness of a man introducing a colleague at a dinner party. "She's a specialist. For your safety." Laura is 35, maybe 40. She has the kind of athletic build that comes from expensive Pilates studios and the clinical neatness of a scalpel. Her dark hair is pulled into a tight bun, not a strand out of place. She's wearing a minimalist gray tunic and black slacks, the uniform of someone who wants to project wellness without the messiness of actual care. Her smile is soft, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. She's a wolf in scrubs. "Hello, Grace," Laura says, her voice a condescending hum. She steps forward, extending a hand. Her fingers are dry and firm when I shake them. "I'm here to help." I give her a vacant, blinking stare. I let my lips part slightly, as if I'm struggling to process her words. Brian swipes the tablet again, and the screen fills with more clips. Me in the hallway at 2 a.m. Me standing in front of the refrigerator, staring at the contents like I've forgotten how to recognize food. Me sitting on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling. Except I don't remember any of it. I look at the footage, then at Brian. He's watching me, searching my face for fear, for confusion, for the crack in the armor that will tell him he's won. I don't give it to him. Instead, I fold my hands in my lap, the Patek Philippe on my wrist catching the light, and say, "I've been having trouble sleeping." It's a soft admission, the kind an elderly woman might make to a concerned son. It's also a calculated move. I'm giving him just enough vulnerability to feed his narrative without handing him the keys to the kingdom. Brian's shoulders relax. He thinks I'm starting to believe him. He doesn't realize he's just entered the office of the most dangerous auditor he'll ever meet. Laura moves closer, her footsteps silent on the rug. She smells faintly of antiseptic and lavender, a combination designed to soothe, to lull, to make you forget that you're being handled. "The blue light is a neurostimulant, Grace," she says, her voice soft and patient, like she's explaining something to a child. "It's compounding the confusion." She's looking at my iPhone, the one resting on the arm of my chair. It's a lifeline. My encrypted files, my contacts, my access to Marcus and the network I've spent 30 years cultivating, all of it is stored in that small, sleek rectangle. Laura reaches out. Her fingers are firm as she pries the phone from my hand. I let it slip away. I don't resist. I don't tighten my grip or pull back. I simply watch as she slides it into the deep pocket of her tunic, the movement smooth and practiced. The digital tether to my world is gone. My palms itch. I want to reach for the silver letter opener on my desk, the one with the sharp, engraved edge that I used to slice through correspondence. I want to press it against the hollow of her throat and ask her how much my son is paying her. But I don't. Instead, I fold my hands in my lap again, my fingers interlacing primly, and say, "I suppose you're right." Laura nods, her expression approving. She's already scribbling something on a sleek digital clipboard, notes, observations, the beginning of a paper trail that will bury me. Brian is watching from the doorway. He's stopped pacing. His shoulders are straighter now, his posture more confident. He thinks the hard part is over. "I had to do it, Mom." Brian's voice cracks on the word Mom, and for a moment, I almost believe he's sorry. But then he keeps talking, and the illusion shatters. "The bank flagged irregular patterns," he says, pacing again, his loafers clicking against the hardwood. "Large withdrawals. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. I had to freeze everything. For your protection." He's lying. I've seen the margin calls. I've watched the way his hands shake when his phone rings, the way he flinches at every email notification. He's drowning in offshore debt, and my $4.5 million trust is the only life raft within reach. By protecting me, he's severed my oxygen. I feign a small, panicked gasp, letting my breath hitch. My right hand flutters to my chest, trembling slightly against the emerald silk of my blouse. "Frozen?" I whisper, my voice thin and high. "But, my accounts." Brian's expression softens. He crosses the room and kneels beside my chair, his hand resting on my arm. The gesture is tender, almost filial, but his grip is too tight. "It's temporary," he says, his voice oozing reassurance. "Just until we get this sorted out. You understand, don't you?" I nod slowly, my steel blue eyes clouded with mock confusion. He needs to believe I'm drowning. In reality, I'm simply timing how long I can hold my breath underwater. I observe the bead of sweat tracing the line of Brian's receding hairline. It's a small detail, but in my line of work, small details are the only things that don't lie. He's soft. He's always been soft. Even as a boy, he lacked the stomach for a clean kill. That's why he brought Laura. She's the technician. He's just the beneficiary. I let my gaze drift around the study, cataloging my assets. The Patek Philippe on my wrist, worth $80,000, but more importantly, a symbol of the life I've built. The vintage ledger on the mahogany shelf, the one filled with handwritten notes from my most lucrative cases. The heavy scent of old wax and paper, the product of decades spent in this room, dismantling the lives of men far more dangerous than my son. These are my assets now. My mind, trained in the brutal geometry of forensic accounting, begins to map the rot in his story. He's over-leveraged. He's frantic. He's sloppy. He has power of attorney in his sights, but he hasn't accounted for the poison pills I've spent a lifetime perfecting. I glance at Laura, who's standing by the window, her arms crossed. She's watching me with the detached interest of a scientist observing a lab rat. Brian is the greed. Laura is the execution. Together, they're a poorly managed hedge fund. And I've always been very good at shorting those. I let my right hand develop a fine, rhythmic tremor against the emerald silk of my skirt. It's a subtle thing, barely noticeable, but Brian's eyes lock onto it immediately. I don't remember the garden, Brian, I say, my voice carrying just the right amount of frail, high-pitched waver. Was I wearing my pearls? It's a ridiculous question. The kind of thing a confused old woman might ask, fixating on irrelevant details while the walls close in around her. Brian's posture relaxes. His shoulders drop, and the tension in his jaw eases. The predator thinks the prey has stopped struggling. No, Mom, he says gently, his voice dripping with false patience. You weren't wearing your pearls. Laura nods approvingly, scribbling another note on her digital clipboard. I catch a glimpse of the screen, phrases like disorientation, memory gaps, potential early-stage dementia. I am playing the role of the shuffling elder to perfection. Every stutter, every feigned lapse in memory, every tremor in my hand is a tactical retreat designed to lure them into a false sense of absolute victory. I've done this before. I've played weaker, slower, less competent than I am, all to give my opponent the confidence to overreach. And when they do, I strike. The air in the study turns frigid. Brian leans in, his shadow eclipsing the light from the window. His cologne, something expensive and cloying, fills the space between us. Leo is coming for Christmas, you know, he says, his voice soft. But Sarah is worried. She's worried about the knife. The threat is a jagged shard of glass pressed against my throat. He's using my grandson. The only person I truly love. The only person I haven't cauterized out of my emotional landscape. If I don't play along with this care plan, I'll never see Leo again. My heart thuds once, heavy and hard, like a gavel striking wood. But I keep my steel blue eyes clouded with mock confusion. I let my lower lip tremble. Leo? I whisper. Is he afraid of me? Brian's expression softens into something that might pass for sympathy. No, Mom. Of course not. But we need to make sure you're safe. For his sake. The implication is clear. If I resist, if I fight back, I'll lose access to the boy. They'll paint me as dangerous, unstable, a threat to a child. And in the courts, in the world of adult protective services and court-appointed evaluators, that narrative will stick. He's touched the one nerve I haven't yet cauterized. But he's also made a mistake. He's shown me exactly what he's willing to sacrifice to win. And that information is worth more than gold. My eyes drift to the silver letter opener resting on the mahogany desk. It's an antique, engraved with my initials, the blade sharp enough to slice through sealed envelopes with surgical precision. Then I look at the leather-bound ledger on the shelf, the one filled with the names of billionaires I've dismantled, the secrets I've uncovered, the fortunes I've redirected. These aren't just objects. They're anchors to a version of me that Brian thinks he's erased. I note the position of the grandfather clock in the corner, its rhythmic ticking a countdown to my displacement. The sound is steady, relentless, the heartbeat of a house that has seen generations of Thorntons rise and fall. I have no phone. No access to my money. And Laura is a shadow I can't shake. But I still have my house. This estate is a fortress of old money and secrets, and I know every floorboard that creaks, every hidden panel, every vulnerability in the infrastructure. Brian thinks he's trapped me in here. He doesn't realize that he's the one who's trapped. He's walked into the office of a woman who's spent 30 years learning how to dismantle lives. And he's just given me all the motivation I need to dismantle his. Laura speaks without looking up from her screen. I've already contacted an evaluator from Adult Protective Services, she says, her voice calm and clinical. Just a formality, Grace. We need a baseline for your cognitive health before we discuss long-term arrangements. The word arrangements hangs in the air like a noose. They aren't just looking for control. They're looking for a permanent relocation. A memory care facility. One of those places with locked doors and fluorescent lights and staff who speak to you in the same soft, condescending tones Laura uses now. The bureaucracy of the state is being weaponized against me. I nod slowly, letting a tear prick at the corner of my eye. It's easier to hide my rage behind a mask of sorrow. I understand, I whisper. Laura smiles. It's a small, professional smile, the kind reserved for patients who are finally cooperating. Good, she says. The evaluator will be here on Monday. 3 days. I have 3 days to prove I'm competent, or 3 days to disappear into the machinery of elder care. Brian is watching me, his expression carefully neutral. But I can see the relief in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands have stopped shaking. He thinks the hard part is over. He thinks I've accepted my fate. He's wrong. I remember the winter Brian was 12. We were sitting at this very table, the chessboard between us, the pieces carved from ivory and ebony. I was trying to teach him the Queen's Gambit, a classic opening that requires patience, foresight, and the willingness to sacrifice a pawn for long-term gain. He got frustrated. He tried to take my knights with brute force, charging his rooks across the board without seeing the trap I'd set with my pawns. He lost. Badly. And when I tried to explain what he'd done wrong, he swept the pieces off the board and stormed out of the room. He hasn't changed. He's still trying to win through sheer aggression, failing to realize that I've always been the one who writes the rules of the game. He thinks he's the general now, commanding the battlefield, issuing orders to his mercenary. But he's just a child playing with his mother's discarded toys. And I've always been very, very good at taking my toys back. As Laura and Brian lead me toward the stairs, I cast a lingering glance at the library. The false mahogany panel is barely visible, hidden behind a biography of Alexander Hamilton and a first edition of the Federalist Papers. Behind it is a landline, a relic from the days when Marcus and I needed a communication channel that didn't exist on any digital grid. It's a hardwired ghost in the machine. The phone is bridged to an external line, routed through a series of anonymous nodes that would take a forensic IT team weeks to trace. I installed it years ago, back when I was handling the discreet needs of unfaithful billionaires who needed to coordinate with their divorce attorneys without their spouses finding out. It's my only line of communication to the outside world. And I just need 60 seconds of privacy to activate the old network. Marcus will answer. He always does. The game is no longer about survival. It's about the total forensic dismantling of my own son. I allow Laura to guide me by the elbow, my steps small and hesitant on the grand staircase. The wood is smooth beneath my slippers, polished to a shine by decades of careful maintenance. The salt air from the Atlantic leaks through the window at the landing, cold and indifferent. The ocean doesn't care about the dramas that unfold in these old houses. It's been here longer than the Thorntons, and it will be here long after we're gone. I look at Brian's back as he climbs ahead of me. The expensive, ill-fitting Italian suit. The slight hunch in his shoulders that suggests he's carrying a weight he's not strong enough to bear. He's already spent money he doesn't own. I can see it in the way he moves, the way his hand shakes when he reaches for the banister. I vow then, with the cold clarity of a final audit, that I will not be the safe he cracks to pay his debts. I will be the poison pill that chokes him. The predator is gone. The professional has returned. The estate has become a panopticon, and I am its sole exhibit. Laura is a permanent fixture now, standing in the corner of the dining room with her hands clasped behind her back, watching me chew every bite of my poached salmon. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her clinical gaze catalogues every movement, the slight tremor I've cultivated in my right hand, the way I struggle to spear a piece of asparagus with my fork. The silence in the house is heavy, oppressive, broken only by the soft scratch of her pen on her clipboard. Every few minutes, she makes a notation. I imagine the words, subject demonstrates fine motor difficulties. Possible progression. When I try to retreat to my study after dinner, she follows. Her footsteps are silent on the hardwood, but I can feel her presence like a shadow I can't shake. Fall risk protocols, Grace, she says, her voice soft and condescending. We wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. I nod slowly, my expression vacant, and let her guide me back to the sitting room. I am a specimen in a jar, and she is the researcher waiting for me to stop twitching. The Earl Grey Laura prepared sits on the side table, steam curling from the delicate porcelain cup. I lift it to my lips, inhaling the familiar bergamot scent. But there's something else beneath it, something sharp and metallic that doesn't belong. I take a small sip. The liquid hits my tongue, and a sharp, metallic tang floods the back of my throat. It clings to the roof of my mouth like a copper penny, bitter and unmistakable. Benzodiazepines. I recognize the chemical signature immediately. I've seen it before, in the divorce cases where a spouse tried to discredit their partner by painting them as unstable, medicated, incapable of rational thought. They're trying to fog my mind. To turn me into the shuffling, confused woman they need me to be. My heart hammers against my ribs, a wild, urgent rhythm, but I force my features to remain slack. I let my eyelids droop slightly, as if the drug is already taking hold. Then I, clumsily, tip the cup, spilling half the contents onto my silk blouse. Oh! I gasp, my voice high and distressed. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've made such a mess. Laura is beside me in an instant, her hand on my shoulder. It's all right, Grace. Let's get you cleaned up. I nod, my hands fluttering uselessly over the stain, and let her guide me toward the bathroom. Once inside, I lock the door behind me and turn on the faucet. I rinse my mouth with freezing water, the cold shock grounding me, washing away the bitter residue. I spit into the sink, watching the water swirl down the drain. They aren't just stealing my money. They're trying to chemically lobotomize the witness. I crack my bedroom door a fraction of an inch, peering into the hallway. Brian is leaning against the wainscoting, his face a blotchy, panicked red. He's gripping a burner phone so hard his knuckles are white, the tendons standing out like cords beneath the skin. I need more time, he hisses into the receiver, his voice low and urgent. I hold my breath, pressing myself against the doorframe. The evaluation is tomorrow, he continues. Once the POA is signed, the trust is liquid. Just tell them the Hamptons property is the collateral. There's a pause. I can't hear the voice on the other end, but I can see the way Brian flinches, the way his free hand comes up to wipe the sweat from his forehead. I know what I owe, he snaps. I know. But the estate is worth $12 million. Once I have control, I can liquidate. 2 weeks. 3 at most. Another pause. Fine. Yes. I understand. He ends the call and shoves the phone into his pocket, leaning his head back against the wall. His eyes are closed, his jaw clenched. He's not just in debt. He's underwater with people who don't take no for an answer. My son isn't a mastermind. He's a drowning man, and he's pulling me down to use as a float. Mother, we found something disturbing. Brian's voice is grave as he enters my bedroom the next morning. Laura is with him, her expression carefully neutral. He drops a stack of bank statements on my duvet, the pages fanning out across the emerald silk. "Look at this," he says, pointing to a highlighted line on the top page. I lean forward, my reading glasses perched on my nose, and study the document. A wire transfer. $500,000. The recipient is listed as the Serenity Foundation, an offshore entity with an address in the Cayman Islands. I've never heard of it. It's a classic frame-up. He's moved the money himself, creating a paper trail of senile impulsivity to justify a conservatorship. The kind of evidence a court-appointed evaluator would see and nod grimly over, confirming their worst suspicions. But he's sloppy. My mind automatically cross-references the routing codes, the account numbers. The foundation's address is a P.O. box I recognize from a 2014 fraud case, a shell company used by a hedge fund manager to hide embezzled funds from his investors. Brian is using the same infrastructure. I look up at him, letting my lip tremble. I just wanted to help the children, Brian, I whisper, my voice frail and bewildered. Brian's expression softens into something that might pass for sympathy, but I can see the relief in his eyes. He thinks I've taken the bait. The court-appointed evaluator arrives at precisely 10 a.m. Dr. Aris is a man in his mid-50s, with thinning gray hair and a suit that smells of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. He carries a leather briefcase and a tablet, and his expression is professionally neutral, the look of a man who's seen this scenario 100 times before. He sits across from me in the sitting room, Laura and Brian hovering in the doorway like anxious stagehands. "Mrs. Thornton," Dr. Aris begins, his voice calm and measured. "I'm going to ask you a few questions. Just answer as best you can." I nod, my hands folded primly in my lap. "Can you tell me today's date?" I pause, furrowing my brow as if I'm struggling to remember. "It's December. I think. The 14th? It's the 16th. Dr. Aris makes a notation on his tablet. "And who is the current president?" "The president," I repeat, my voice trailing off. I let my gaze drift to the window, as if the answer might be written in the clouds. I'm not sure. Is it still Obama?" "It's not." Dr. Aris makes another notation. "Can you tell me why you sent $500,000 to the Serenity Foundation?" I look at him, my eyes wide and confused. "The children," I whisper. "They needed help. The man on the phone said they needed help." Dr. Aris's expression doesn't change, but I can see the conclusion forming behind his eyes. He's already writing the report in his head. Subject demonstrates significant cognitive decline. Memory impairment, disorientation, susceptibility to financial exploitation. Brian is watching from the doorway, a mask of tragic concern plastered on his face. The legal machinery is grinding toward my interment. I feel the noose tightening, but I need the evaluator to believe I'm a lost cause to keep Brian's guard down. I wait for the precise moment Laura turns to check the oven. She's preparing dinner, roasted chicken, the scent of rosemary and garlic filling the kitchen. Her back is to me, her attention focused on the oven timer. I stumble against the sideboard, sending a 19th-century porcelain vase crashing to the marble floor. The sound is catastrophic, a sharp crack followed by the tinkling scatter of 1,000 fragments. "Oh dear." I wail, forcing a high-pitched note of distress into my voice. "Oh, I'm so clumsy. I'm so sorry." Laura spins around, her expression shifting from alarm to professional concern. She crosses the kitchen in 3 strides, kneeling to gather the shards. "It's all right, Grace," she says, her voice soothing. "Just step back. We don't want you to cut yourself on the glass." I nod, my hands fluttering uselessly, and back toward the hallway. I'll be in the library," I murmur. Laura doesn't look up. She's too focused on the mess, on the danger of the glass, on the liability of an elderly woman with a bleeding foot. I slip into the library and close the door behind me. I have exactly 60 seconds. I slide the biography of Hamilton aside, my fingers finding the cold, recessed dial of the bridge line. It's hidden behind the false panel, invisible unless you know where to look. I punch in the 10-digit code from memory, my hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. The dial tone is a beautiful, analog heartbeat. Thornton here. Code gray. My voice is low, urgent, barely above a whisper. On the other end, Marcus doesn't ask questions. He knows the protocol. We developed it years ago, back when I was handling cases where clients needed to communicate without their spouses, or the courts, finding out. Copy, he says, his voice calm and professional. What do you need? Estate furnace is failing, I add. Needs a full overhaul. Bring the heavy diagnostic kit. There's a brief pause. I can almost hear the gears turning in his mind, decoding the shorthand. Code gray means I'm under domestic siege. Heavy diagnostic kit means surveillance, counter-surveillance, and a clean line of communication. Understood, Marcus says. I'll be there within the hour. I hang up just as the library door creaks open. I am sitting in the armchair, a volume of Keats open on my lap, when Laura enters. My pulse is steady as stone, my expression serene. Everything all right, Grace? She asks, her eyes scanning the room. I look up, blinking slowly. Just reading, I say softly. The poetry helps me remember. Laura nods, her expression approving, and closes the door. A white van with North Shore HVAC emblazoned on the side pulls into the gravel drive exactly 47 minutes later. I'm watching from the upstairs window as Marcus climbs out, looking every bit the weary technician in grease-stained coveralls and a worn cap. He's carrying a large toolbox, the kind that rattles when you set it down. Brian intercepts him at the door. I can't hear the conversation, but I can see the tension in Brian's posture, the way he gestures toward the van. He's trying to turn Marcus away. I appear at the top of the stairs, gripping the banister. Brian. I call out, my voice sharp and authoritative. The draft in my bedroom is intolerable. I've been freezing for weeks, and you've done nothing about it. It's a performance worthy of a stage actress, the eccentric old woman clinging to the last shreds of her authority, demanding that her house be maintained to her standards. Brian's face flushes. He glances at Laura, who's standing in the hallway, then back at me. Mother, this isn't a good time. I don't care about your timing. I snap, descending the stairs with measured fury. This is my house, and I will not freeze in my own bedroom. Let the man do his job. Brian relents, stepping aside with a tight, frustrated nod. Marcus catches my eye, a brief, professional flash of recognition. He's carrying a large toolbox. It's not filled with wrenches. It's filled with my salvation. While Marcus inspects the vents in the master suite, I keep Laura busy by demanding she help me organize my cashmere sweaters by color. I can't find the dove gray, I say, my voice rising with feigned agitation. It's always the dove gray that goes missing. Are you sure you didn't move it? Laura's expression is patient, long-suffering. I haven't touched your sweaters, Grace. Let's look together. I pull open the drawers of the mahogany dresser, making a show of rifling through the neatly folded garments. From the hallway, I hear the rhythmic thud of Brian on a margin call in the study, his voice cracking with desperation. I told you, I need more time. The evaluation confirmed it. She's not competent. The judge will sign the order by Friday. It's the perfect acoustic screen. In the master suite, Marcus works with the silence of a ghost. I can't see him, but I know what he's doing. Installing pinhole lenses behind the crown molding, inside the smoke detectors, beneath the lip of the antique mirror. By the time he leaves, the Thornton estate will be the most bugged square mile in the Hamptons. Laura is holding up a cashmere sweater. Is this the one? I blink at it, as if seeing it for the first time. Oh. Yes. Thank you, dear. 20 minutes later, Marcus appears in the doorway of my bedroom, wiping his hands on a rag. All set, Mrs. Thornton, he says, his voice professional. Furnace is running clean now. You shouldn't have any more drafts. He crosses the room to shake my hand, a formal, old-fashioned gesture. As he does, he presses a small, flat device into my palm. It's warm from his pocket, no larger than a deck of cards. I curl my fingers around it, slipping it into the pocket of my cardigan. Thank you, I say softly. Marcus nods, tips his cap, and leaves. Locked in the bathroom with the fan running, I activate the handheld monitor Marcus gave me. The screen flickers to life, showing a high-definition view of the master bedroom. Brian and Laura are there, their professional masks discarded. They look like two ghouls counting coins. Brian is pouring a drink from my crystal decanter, the 30-year-old Macallan that Marcus gave me on our anniversary. His hand is finally steady now that he thinks the finish line is in sight. Laura is sitting on the edge of the bed, her posture relaxed. She's scrolling through her phone, her expression bored. The evaluator bought it completely, Brian says, raising his glass. She's signing the order tomorrow. By Monday, she'll be in the facility. Laura glances up. And the trust? Transfers the moment the POA is executed. I'll have access to the full $4.5 million by Tuesday. I watch them, a cold heat blooming in my chest. I've spent my life watching predators from the shadows, documenting their sins, cataloging their greed. I didn't expect to find one in my own DNA. To the relocation, on Monday, Laura says, raising her own glass. Her voice on the feed is crisp, clear. The audio quality is flawless. Brian laughs, a jagged, ugly sound that makes my skin crawl. Make sure the Monday dose is heavy, he says, swirling the scotch in his glass. I don't want her making a scene when the transport arrives. Laura nods. I've already calculated it. 2 milligrams of lorazepam in the morning tea, another milligram at lunch. She'll be compliant. Docile. They discuss the cocktail with the casual indifference of pharmacists, detailing the exact dosages they've been slipping into my evening tea for the past 3 days. I record every second of it. The file size grows on the encrypted drive Marcus installed, a digital ledger of their betrayal. It's the most beautiful evidence I've ever gathered. My hands are trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer, visceral satisfaction of watching my case build itself. I tuck the monitor into its hiding spot behind the loose tile beneath the sink. The power dynamic in this house has shifted 180 degrees. Brian thinks he's the warden of a decaying mind, shepherding his confused mother toward a facility where she'll spend her remaining days staring at beige walls and eating pureed vegetables. But I have turned his sanctuary into a laboratory. Every room is wired. Every conversation is recorded. Every casual admission of guilt is catalogued and timestamped. I am no longer a victim waiting for relocation. I am an auditor preparing a final, devastating report. I walk back into the bedroom and greet Laura with a vacant, drugged-looking smile. I think I'd like some tea, I say softly, my voice carrying just the right amount of drowsy compliance. Laura nods, her expression pleased. Of course, Grace. I'll bring it right up. I settle into the armchair by the window, watching the Atlantic churn in the distance. The metallic tang of the benzodiazepine still clings to the roof of my mouth, but beneath it, I can almost taste the victory. I find Sarah in the kitchen, standing by the window with her arms wrapped around herself. She's staring out at the Atlantic, her face pale in the morning light. Brian is upstairs, his voice a muffled roar as he argues with someone on the phone. Laura is occupied with a medical delivery at the gate, more supplies for my care, no doubt. This is my moment. I slip into the kitchen, closing the door softly behind me. Sarah doesn't turn, but I can see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers grip her elbows. I reach into the pocket of my Chanel jacket and pull out a folded printout, a ledger of Brian's secret gambling debts and margin calls that Marcus managed to access through his network. The numbers are staggering: $2.3 million in offshore casino markers, $1.8 million in margin calls from a failing cryptocurrency hedge fund. Sarah, I say, my voice low and urgent. Look at the dates. She turns, startled. Her eyes are red-rimmed, exhausted. I press the paper into her hand. He isn't protecting me. He's liquidating us. Sarah's thumb traces the staggering figures, her brow furrowing. I can see the calculations happening behind her eyes, the same calculations I've made 1,000 times for desperate clients. These debts are dated before he ever mentioned your concerns, I continue, my voice steady now, professional. Before the security footage. Before Laura. He needed my money to save himself, and he needed me declared incompetent to access it. I see the flicker of the woman I used to know, the mother, the protector, the Stanford-educated attorney who used to review contracts with the same precision I once did. For a second, the fog of Brian's gaslighting lifts from her eyes. Sarah takes the paper, her hands trembling as she studies the columns. He said you were hallucinating these numbers, Grace, she murmurs, her voice barely above a whisper. He said your mind was creating enemies. That you were seeing patterns that weren't there. I take her hand. Mine is still, steady as stone. Hers is shaking. Does this look like a hallucination? I ask softly. She stares at the ledger, her thumb tracing the routing numbers, the timestamps, the offshore account structures. These are real. Verifiable. The kind of paper trail that doesn't lie. I can see the gears turning in her mind, the realization that the man she sleeps next to, the father of her child, is a stranger. The concerned son narrative Brian spent months building is unraveling. She looks up at me, and for the first time in weeks, she doesn't see a patient. She sees a victim. Grace, she whispers. How long have you? The heavy kitchen door swings open with enough force to rattle the frame. Brian stands there, his chest heaving, his eyes darting between us. They land on the paper in Sarah's hand, and his expression shifts. The rehearsed concern vanishes, replaced by a cold, predatory sharpness. Sarah, he says, his voice tight and controlled. What did I tell you about the delusions? You're overstimulating her. Sarah opens her mouth to respond, but Brian doesn't wait for an answer. He crosses the kitchen in 3 strides and grabs Sarah's upper arm, too hard. I see her wince, see the way her fingers reflexively release the paper as he pulls her toward the door. She's been like this all morning, Brian says, his voice rising just enough to sound convincing. Making up stories. Accusing me of. Christ, Sarah, you know better than to feed into it. He treats her like a confused child, mirroring the way he treats me. As he leads her out of the kitchen, he casts a glance back at me over his shoulder. It's pure, unadulterated venom. The message is clear: I know what you're trying to do, and it won't work. An hour later, I smell it. The faint, sulfurous rot of unburnt natural gas, seeping through the vents. I'm in the sitting room when it hits me, a chemical heaviness in the air that makes my eyes water. I stand, my pulse quickening, and follow the scent to the kitchen. The range is venting silently into the room, all 4 burners open but unlit. The safety valves have been bypassed. Someone has tampered with the stove. My mind races. I cross to the basement door and try the handle. It's locked. I pull harder, but the heavy steel bolt has been jammed from the outside. The door won't budge. Brian is no longer just gaslighting me. He's creating evidence of my lethality. A forgetful grandmother who left the gas on. A near explosion that could have killed her grandson. The final nail in the coffin of my competency. I reach for the knobs to shut off the gas, my hands trembling now with genuine fear. And then I hear it. A small voice from the mudroom. Grandma? Why does it smell funny? Leo stands by the door, clutching his toy knight, the one I gave him for his 7th birthday, the one with the silver sword and the shield emblazoned with a dragon. He's wearing his pajamas, his dark hair tousled from sleep. The gas is thick enough now to make my eyes water, to burn the back of my throat. I don't think. I lunge for him, scooping his small body into my arms and sprinting for the terrace doors. My slippers skid on the marble, but I don't stop. I hit the French doors with my shoulder, bursting out into the cold salt air. Leo is coughing, his small hands clutching at my robe. It's okay, sweetheart, I gasp, setting him down on the stone terrace. It's okay. Just breathe. Behind me, I hear the heavy thud of footsteps on the stairs. Brian and Sarah appear at the top, their faces masks of shock. My God, Grace. Brian screams, his voice perfectly pitched for a witness. The stove. You almost killed him. He descends the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, and rushes past me to scoop Leo into his arms. To Sarah, standing at the top of the stairs with her hand over her mouth, it looks like I'm fleeing the scene of a crime I almost committed. The look on Sarah's face breaks what's left of my heart. It's not anger. It's pure, visceral horror. She descends the stairs slowly, her eyes locked on me, and crosses the terrace. She snatches Leo from Brian's arms, backing away from me as if I were a monster. I can't do this anymore, Brian, she sobs, her voice cracking. You were right. She's dangerous. Sarah, I start, but the words die in my throat. What can I say? That someone else turned on the gas? That Brian staged this? I have no proof. Not yet. Brian comforts her, his hand on her back, his voice low and soothing. But over her shoulder, his eyes meet mine. He's won. He successfully weaponized her love for her son against me. The evaluator's report won't even be necessary now. My own family is ready to sign the commitment papers. By nightfall, the house is a tomb. Brian has fired Mrs. Higgins, my housekeeper of 20 years, claiming her presence was confusing to me. I watched from the upstairs window as she left, her face tight with suppressed tears, her hands clutching a cardboard box filled with her personal belongings. She didn't look back. The familiar sounds of the estate, the humming of the vacuum, the clinking of real porcelain as she set the table for dinner, the soft murmur of her voice as she answered the phone, are gone. They've been replaced by the silence of a clinical facility. It's just me, the mercenary Laura, and my son. I sit in my darkened study, the only light coming from the grandfather clock in the corner. The ticking is relentless, a countdown to my displacement. I listen to the waves crash against the cliffs, the sound distant and indifferent. I am utterly alone, stripped of my staff, my allies, and my reputation. Brian enters my room at midnight. The overhead lights blaze on, blindingly bright after the hours I've spent in darkness. I flinch, raising a hand to shield my eyes. He drops a thick stack of legal vellum on my lap. The pages are crisp, official, bound with a blue backing sheet. A general power of attorney. Sign it, mother, he says, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Today was the end of the line. You're going to a facility on Monday. The oily concern from this morning is gone. He's done playing the loving son. He wants the $4.5 million, and he wants it before the creditors break down the doors of the estate. I stare at the document, my hands gripping the edges of the duvet. Brian, I whisper. Please. I didn't. Don't, he snaps, cutting me off. Don't insult me by pretending you don't know what you did. You almost killed Leo. Sarah is terrified of you. This is over. Laura stands by the door, her scrubs a ghostly white in the harsh light. The state-run units are difficult, Grace, she says, her voice a soft, clinical threat. No windows. Shared rooms with women who scream through the night. Heavy sedation to manage aggressive outbursts like the one today. She steps closer, the scent of antiseptic cloying and oppressive. But if you sign, she continues, Brian can afford the boutique care. A private room. A garden. Access to your books. It's the classic carrot and stick, wielded by a woman who wouldn't care if I lived or died as long as the check cleared. Brian leans against the dresser, his arms crossed, watching me with cold, calculating eyes. Your choice, mother, he says. Sign, or spend the rest of your life in a concrete box. I let the first sob break through, a jagged, ugly sound of a woman who has finally lost her mind. I shrink into the pillows, pulling the duvet to my chin, my shoulders shaking. I almost hurt Leo, I wail, my voice cracking. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't remember turning on the stove. I don't remember the garden. I don't remember any of it. My hands are trembling as I press them to my face. Please, Brian, I gasp, the words muffled. Just make it stop. I'll sign anything. Just don't take the books. Please. Not the books. I play the broken victim with every ounce of my professional skill. I need him to feel the rush of total, effortless victory. I need him to believe that the safe has finally, irrevocably cracked. I take the Mont Blanc pen from his hand, the one Marcus gave me when I won the Vanderbilt case. My fingers shake so violently that the first stroke is a mere scratch across the signature line. I pause, looking up at Brian. His expression is impatient, expectant. Then I glance at the smoke detector in the corner of the ceiling, the one Marcus installed with the pinhole camera embedded in the lens. I look directly into it for a fraction of a second. Then I turn back to the paper and sign. Grace Thornton. The script is wavering, barely legible, the kind of signature that screams coercion. Brian grabs the paper before the ink is even dry, his face transformed by a sickening, triumphant grin. He doesn't realize that a signature obtained under documented duress isn't an asset. It's a confession. Brian turns on his heel, the POA clutched to his chest like a trophy. Sleep well, Mom, he says, pausing at the door. Laura will bring your tea in a moment. He exits, and I hear the heavy click of the deadbolt sliding into place from the outside. He's locked me in. I sit on the bed, my hands folded in my lap, and listen to his footsteps recede down the hallway. He thinks the safe is cracked. He thinks he has the millions. He doesn't know that by exercising that POA, he has just tripped the poison pill in my revocable living trust, the clause I wrote 6 months ago, the one that states any attempt to access the funds under duress or while I am under conservatorship will result in the immediate and irrevocable transfer of all assets to Sarah and Leo. The professional in me watches the locked door with a cold, silent countdown. The trap is shut. Now, I just have to wait for morning. The sun rises over the Atlantic, cold and blinding. From my window, I watch Brian pacing the lawn, his phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly with his free hand. He looks like a man who has just won the lottery, already spending the $4.5 million in his head, calculating how much breathing room each wire transfer will buy him. He's fired the groundskeepers. I watched them leave this morning, their trucks disappearing down the drive. The rose garden is already succumbing to the frost, the petals browning at the edges. He thinks he's cleared the board. He thinks he's removed the complications, the witnesses, the people who might ask uncomfortable questions. But he's simply removed the witnesses to his own downfall. I sit at my vanity, studying my reflection in the mirror. I look tired. The past weeks have carved new lines around my eyes, but my hand is steady as I reach for my lipstick, the deep crimson I've worn for 30 years. I apply it with surgical precision, the way I used to before walking into a deposition. The tremor is retired. "One last dinner, Brian," I call through the locked door, my voice a dusty whisper. "For Leo's sake. Please. I just want to see him one more time before Monday." There's a long silence on the other side. I press my forehead against the wood, playing the part of the defeated matriarch seeking a final shred of dignity. "One dinner," I repeat. "That's all I'm asking." Brian scoffs. I can hear the arrogance in his breathing, the way he exhales like a man who's already won. "Fine," he says finally. "Tonight. 7 o'clock. But Laura will be monitoring you the entire time." "Of course," I whisper. "Thank you, Brian." I lean against the door after his footsteps fade, a thin, sharp smile touching my lips. He wants to sit at the head of my table one last time before he ships me off. He wants a victory lap disguised as a meal, a final display of his dominance. I'm not inviting him to dinner. I'm inviting him to a deposition. Using the bridge line one last time, I give Marcus the green light. 8 o'clock sharp, I say, my voice low and crisp. "Front gate. Bring the precinct commander and the APS supervisor. The real one, not the evaluator Brian bribed." "Copy," Marcus says. "The files?" "Already uploaded to the secure cloud. Every drug-laced tea, every whispered threat, every fraudulent wire transfer. Time-stamped, cross-referenced, and notarized." I can hear the smile in his voice. "You always were thorough." "The perimeter is set," I continue. "The trap is no longer mine. It belongs to the state of New York now." "Understood. We'll be there." I hang up the receiver and slide the biography of Hamilton back into place, concealing the false panel. The endgame has begun. Laura enters at 6 p.m. with the pre-dinner tea. She's carrying a silver tray, the porcelain cup rattling slightly as she sets it on my nightstand. I can smell the lorazepam from a foot away, a heavy, bitter dose meant to keep me compliant for the evening's festivities. "Drink up, Grace," she says, her voice soft and clinical. "You'll want to be calm for dinner." I nod slowly, reaching for the cup with trembling hands. As I do, I clumsily knock my jewelry box over, sending a cascade of pearls across the hardwood floor. "Oh!" I gasp, my voice high and distressed. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy." Laura sighs, kneeling to gather the pearls. In the 3 seconds she spends with her back turned, I swap the cups with a sleight of hand I perfected during a decade of high-stakes corporate espionage, switching the drugged tea with the clean Earl Grey she brought for herself. When she stands, I'm holding my cup, my hands still shaking. "There you go," she says, dropping the pearls back into the box. "Drink it while it's warm." I take a small sip and watch as Laura reaches for the other cup, the one laced with sedatives, and takes a sip to soothe her own nerves. I drink my untainted Earl Grey and feel the fog lift. The dining room is a masterpiece of tension. Brian sits at the head of the table, carving the roast with a jagged, aggressive energy. The knife scrapes against the porcelain platter, a sound that sets my teeth on edge. Sarah is a ghost. She sits to his right, her eyes red-rimmed and fixed on Leo's plate. She thinks this is the end of her family, the last meal before her mother-in-law is carted away to a facility. Leo is quiet, pushing his mashed potatoes around with his fork. He keeps glancing at me, his small face uncertain. Laura stands by the sideboard, her posture still rigid, but I can see the way her eyes are beginning to glaze over. The sedative I swapped is starting to take hold. I sit at the foot of the table, the confused grandmother, my hands folded primly in my lap. I watch the clock on the mantel. 7:55 p.m. The silence is broken only by the silver clinking against china, the sound of a family that has nothing left to say to each other. "A toast," Brian says suddenly, standing and raising a glass of my vintage scotch, the 30-year-old Macallan that's worth more than his car. "To the Thornton legacy," he says, his voice carrying across the table. "To moving forward." Sarah doesn't move. Leo looks confused. I don't reach for my glass. Instead, my thumb finds the small, haptic remote hidden in the folds of my napkin, the one Marcus installed as part of the smart home override system. I press the override sequence. The lights dim. The holiday music cuts to a sharp, jarring silence. Brian freezes, his glass halfway to his lips. His eyes dart to the ceiling, then to me. "What the hell is this, Grace?" he snaps. I don't answer. I just look at the massive 80-inch digital art screens on the wall, the ones Brian insisted on installing last year, the ones he thought made the dining room look modern. The screens erupt into high-definition clarity. It's the footage from the master suite. The timestamp glows in the corner, December 15th, 11:47 p.m. Brian's voice fills the room, distorted but unmistakable. "Make sure the Monday dose is heavy." I don't want her making a scene when the transport arrives. On screen, Laura laughs, that jagged, ugly sound I heard through the monitor. She's sitting on the edge of the bed, stirring white powder into a teacup. 2 milligrams of lorazepam in the morning tea, another milligram at lunch, she says, her tone casual. She'll be compliant. Docile. Sarah lets out a strangled gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. Brian's face goes from flushed to a sickly, translucent white. He sets the glass down with a sharp crack, his eyes locked on the screen. "Turn it off," he hisses. "Grace, turn it off." I don't. The footage continues. Brian raising a glass. "To the relocation on Monday." Laura nodding. "The state-run units are brutal. But if she doesn't sign, that's where she's going." Sarah is shaking now, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Brian turns to look at me. The confused woman is gone. I am sitting perfectly upright, my steel blue eyes pinned on his. "You really should have read the fine print of the Revocable Living Trust, Brian," I say, my voice cutting through his panic like a scalpel. I place a printed document on the table, the poison pill clause I drafted 6 months ago with my estate attorney, the one I buried in the appendices where Brian would never think to look. Clause 14.2, I read aloud, my tone as clinical as an audit report. "Any attempt to exercise power of attorney under conditions of documented duress, medical interference, or coercion triggers an immediate, irrevocable forfeiture of all beneficiary interests." I watched the realization hit him. His mouth opens, closes. His hands grip the edge of the table. "The moment you forced me to sign that POA last night," I continue, "you ceased to be a beneficiary of this estate. You didn't just sign a power of attorney, Brian. You signed your own disinheritance. The signature you took last night was recorded by 3 different cameras," I continue, my tone unwavering. "Including the audio of your ultimatum. Sign, or spend the rest of your life in a concrete box. Do you remember saying that?" Brian's breathing is ragged now. He's gripping the table so hard his knuckles are white. "By the time you walked out of my room, you were legally a stranger to this estate. You have no money, Brian. You have no trust. And according to the margin calls I forwarded to the SEC, along with evidence of your fraudulent wire transfers and your attempt to frame me with the Serenity Foundation, you have no career." He tries to lunge forward, but his legs buckle. He catches himself on the edge of the table, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. Laura is slumping in her chair now, her eyes half closed. The sedative has claimed her. Sarah is staring at Brian like she's never seen him before. He spent his life playing checkers while I was playing the long game. I slide a heavy, leather-bound folder down the table toward Sarah. The kill file. Everything is in there, I say, my voice softening slightly. The offshore accounts he used to frame me with the fraudulent charity. The evidence of the drugging. The staged gas leak. And the new trust documents. Sarah's hands tremble as she opens the folder. Her eyes scan the pages, bank statements, photographs, transcripts of recorded conversations. Tears stream down her face. I've vested everything in you and Leo, Sarah, I say. The estate, the trust, the investments. Brian is a liability that has been written off. I see the relief wash over her, followed by a cold, protective fury as she looks at her husband. She closes the folder and pulls Leo closer to her, her arm wrapping around his shoulders. The predator has been declawed. The heavy front doors of the estate groan open. The rhythmic, heavy footfalls of the local police and the APS supervisor echo in the hallway, growing louder as they approach the dining room. Laura has slumped completely into her chair now, her head lolling to the side. The sedative has finally claimed her. Brian stands paralyzed as the officers enter. The video loop is still playing on the screens, Brian bragging about the windowless facility, Laura discussing dosages, the two of them toasting to my relocation. The APS supervisor, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression, looks at the screen. Then at me. Mrs. Thornton, she asks. I stand up with effortless grace, smoothing my skirt. Everything is under control, officer, I say calmly. I believe you have everything you need on the drive Mr. Delacroix provided. She nods, her expression grim. We do. Two officers move toward Brian. He doesn't resist. He's still staring at me, his expression a mixture of rage and utter disbelief. As they lead him toward the door, he finally speaks. You planned this, he whispers. From the beginning. I meet his eyes. No, Brian, I say softly. I taught you to play chess when you were 12. You just never learned the lesson. The flashing red and blue lights of the cruisers fade down the drive, taking my son and his accomplice with them. The house is quiet again. The screens have gone dark. The grandfather clock ticks steadily in the corner. The scent of salt air and old paper fills the room. Sarah has taken Leo upstairs. I can hear her voice, soft and soothing, as she tucks him into bed. I walk out onto the terrace, a glass of untainted scotch in my hand, the Macallan Brian tried to toast with, the one Marcus gave me on our anniversary. The Atlantic is dark and restless, crashing against the cliffs with a power that doesn't need to explain itself. I take a sip, the warmth spreading through my chest. The audit is complete. The assets are secured. Leo is safe. I am 72 years old, and for the first time in 30 years, the books are perfectly balanced. I stand on the terrace, the cold December wind whipping through my silver hair, and watch the sun set over the water. The professional has retired. The grandmother remains. If you made it to this moment, thank you for listening all the way through. Most people bail before the bill comes due. But here, the bill always comes due. What started as humiliation and disrespect ended with receipts, truth, and a payoff they never saw coming. If you want more stories where karma shows up without mercy, hit subscribe and come back for the next one. Now tell me in the comments, what was the most disgusting thing they did? What crossed the line for you?